Welcome to the Witcher Lorecast, the show that explores the vast lore behind the Witcher games, show, and books.
Before the conjunction of the spheres, an interdimensional cataclysm that struck 1,500 years before the present moment, the world was inhabited solely by non-human races. Elves, Dwarves, and other beings now long forgotten. It is they who first built magnificent cities, gave birth to high culture, and made the first steps towards enlightenment. After the cataclysm, everything changed. It is said the conjunction of the spheres not only first introduced human beings to this world, but also brought potent magic and bloodthirsty monsters to it as well. Creatures like ghouls, bruxa, and graviers infested more and more land, killing settlers and destroying everything in their path. Century by century, the known world slowly ceased to exist, and a new order was born. One where humans, short-lived, energetic beings with a thirst for expansion, conquered the high races of the olden days.
Welcome, everybody, to the Witcher Lorecast. We are live with our very first episode. I am your host, Tom, or Robots. You can call me either. And I'm here with my friend Toasty. Toasty, how are you doing, buddy?
I'm here.
You're here. And excited. and man, this is going to be awesome because anybody who knows of my work knows that I do a number of Lorecast shows, everything from Fallout to Mass Effect and Elder Scrolls and even Dungeons and Dragons. And Toasty here, I've known for a while now. He's been one of our patron supporters of one of our shows. And he reached out to me recently and was like, I'm thinking about doing a Witcher lore show. And I was like, well, maybe we should do one together because that sounds awesome. I love The Witcher. So this is the brainchild that we birthed out of our skulls, which sounds absolutely disgusting and like a monster in one of the Witcher games. And here we are doing our first episode. So Toasty, can you share a little bit about yourself and some of your background with the games and the shows and the show and the books and whatever else?
Hi, I'm Toasty.
He's a little nervous, so we're gonna ease him in here.
Just a little bit. I played through the games. I've read the books. I just reread the books.
Oh wow!
To freshen up. I've watched. I think I've watched the Netflix series like 3 times now.
Yeah, it's so good.
I know I've definitely watched the first episode like 10 times because it was so good.
Wow. Yeah, no, the series is so good. And for those of you who are tuning in who have maybe only played The Witcher 3 or maybe The Witcher 2 or some of the Gwent card game, there's so much rich information out there. You may not be aware of it, but the games actually come after the books. And many of the books were written before this was even made into a game. So there's this entire world of lore out there that existed before this was even in game form about, 10, 12 years ago when they made the first Witcher game. It's been a while now. It's been a while, quite a while. But that's Toasty. Toasty is our expert, as you can see, on this material, and I am your host. And I'm a big fan of the franchise, but I don't know as much as Toasty does, so I'm kind of the more casual stand-in. I've played all 3 of the main games. I've played Gwent. I've watched the show. I've read some of the books, although I'm not a completionist in the way that Toasty is. But my perspective is to bring in the questions that some of the more casual players of the series will think to ask and be kind of the stand-in for you. So it's kind of like a pairing of, like if you watch sports, it would be like the main host and then the color commentator, or, the host and the expert, those kinds of things. And I also have a background in history and religious studies and philosophy and psychology and science and all of these kinds of things, which is really fun and it's become really useful in some of the other shows that I do because I can bring in those topics and connect them into the fantasy world that we're talking about. And usually with fantasy worlds, you find a lot of commonalities between cultures and historical events and things like that. So it helps you kind of ground what's going on in this fantasy world in a way that might raise some interesting moral questions and connections to the real world and the things that we actually deal with in our everyday lives. So we're hoping to bring you a wonderful mix of deep and interesting lore, a lot of things you probably didn't already know. We're going to go deeper than you might have gone before with that stuff, but we're also going to be spoiling some things. So be aware, this is a Lorecast. The assumption here, especially because all of these games are now fairly old and most of the material out there has been out there for a while. Even the TV show's over a year old at this point, isn't it? Was it a year? Did it come out in the fall? This last year has taken forever. It's over a year, right?
I think it came out like in did it come out in 2019? I think it came out in 2019.
Yeah.
Actually. So
yeah.
It's been a while.
Yeah, it'll be almost 2 years.
Because they did all the filming. They've been doing filming for a while for season 2.
Yes. Yeah, I think it has been almost 2 years now. This fall will be 2 years since the series was released. Man, time flies. This last year has been nuts. But anyway, that's the background. That's what we're about. And I hope you guys buckle in for the ride because I think you're really going to enjoy it. And if you heard that little intro we had with the description of the conjunction of the spheres, then you now know what this episode is going to be about. So let's talk about it. Where do we start with this, Toasty? What do we need to know about the conjunction of the spheres? First of all, it sounds like a really cool phrase, and it comes up in the games. So if you've only played the games, you may remember this phrase, but you may not have a full understanding about what it actually means. So where do we start?
Well, I think the best place to probably start would be what there was before the conjunction, just so we have an understanding about what the conjunction meant for the universe as a whole. Right.
Because with a lot of these games, you start in the world, especially when you play the games, and you feel like, oh, the world is how it is, and it's always been kind of similar to this. But things were very different before the conjunction of the spheres, like significantly so.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Very different. For everyone to know, the name of like the Witcher world that we all know and love is actually referred to as the continent. So like the area that encompasses like the northern kingdoms down to Nilfgaard, it's all part of the continent, which kind of makes it sound like a smaller world than it actually is, you know?
Yeah, well, if you look at the maps, we don't get a globe. We get what looks like the edge of a continent. It's very similar to the maps of like Faerun in Dungeons and Dragons, where you have a western-facing coastline, and then as things move over to the east, you hit like mountains and stuff, and the map ends. You don't ever see, the other coast. And if you go south enough, you don't see a coast. And if you go north enough, you don't really see a coast. It's just kind of a section of what must be a bigger continent.
It tells us that there's more beyond, because obviously things show up, but it doesn't really talk much about like what is beyond. We're very focused on this area.
Yeah.
So we start with the elder races. Those are the original settlers before the conjunction that were part of the continent. Specifically, we're going to start with the gnomes.
Gnomes? It all begins with gnomes, because doesn't it always
begins with gnomes.
All right. So we've got the beginning of intelligent races on the continent, and we've got David the gnome. So
David the gnome?
Well, so where do we go from there? So we've got gnomes, which aren't very common in the stories or games.
I mean, you see a little bit. They're in the books a bit more, I think, than the story makes, like the games make use of. But it's kind of hard to like see them. I think we get gnomes and stuff confused a lot with like halflings, just because
they're little.
We're used to, Lord of the Rings with the hobbits and things.
Right.
So the gnomes are the original inhabitants of the continent. They built the first settlements, and we don't really know when that started. We just know that they were the first. They were there before anyone else. So they set up everything. They built like the first like settlements and started everything off. And then we get to 2700 BR. And just a note for us to know the dating system of The Witcher. A lot of this early kind of conjunction era stuff is going to be referred to as BR, or before resurrection, which is kind of a funny thing, just because they don't explain the resurrection So I kind of imagine it a lot like, how our dating system is, how we have like BC and then AD. But in this situation, it would be as if we never knew what the BC was, like what that pinnacle moment was. We know it was the resurrection.
But the resurrection of who or what?
Of what? Yeah. Of who? Like what?
Well, it sounds like a religious focused dating system, like which is most of what we used in the Western world through most of our history, being that the Western world was Christianized and BC was before Christ. And so we basically had a before resurrection kind of dating system as well. But in this case, we don't really know what this means. The resurrection of who or what? Specifically, this isn't before the conjunction. Like BC before conjunction might make more sense, but that's not how they date things.
So yeah, I kind of got that same impression of more, because there's a lot of like religious aspects to the universe, so it's just always going to be a mystery, I think. So then in 2700 BR, we get the dwarves as they start to show up, start establishing colonies for themselves on the continent.
And we don't necessarily know where they came from either, right? They just kind of start appearing from somewhere.
Yeah, a lot of these races, they show up and they just start settling down.
Yeah, it's almost like they moved in from some other part of the continent or something, or maybe they became evolved enough or settled enough to actually build places that were inhabitable long enough in history for people to know a rough date for how long they'd been there.
I think so. It sounds like the dwarves arrived by land. Where specifically they came from, not entirely sure. But they do make a point of stating that elves and humans show up on ships. Where they don't say that for dwarves.
Yeah, so dwarves and gnomes.
I would assume
that
they arrived on land unless they could fly, but there's no evidence of that. So
yeah, I don't think flying dwarves is a thing in the lore.
But it also makes sense for dwarves. A lot of like dwarven like kind of mythology is having to do with them being more like bound to the earth, living under the earth usually. So it kind of makes sense.
Yeah, and the Witcher stories are very grounded in mythologies, and one of the things that's so interesting about this that I want to bring up on this first episode is that the reason why we get a variety of different monsters and mythology in the Witcher series is because the author is pulling from both Western and Eastern European storytelling and tales and passed down stories and folklore, all these kinds of things. So the stuff that's more familiar with us as being a society, especially in the US, that's more Western European derived, are things like werewolves and vampires and things like that. But then you have other monsters, which if you grew up in Eastern Europe would be familiar to you in the same way that vampires and werewolves are to us. So to say that he's using some sort of like these kinds of mythologies and common stories and fantasy tropes as a foundation for a number of these things wouldn't be wrong. I think that that's probably very accurate. The dwarves being more grounded and of the earth, the elves seemingly being a little bit like humanish, but different in a way.
That makes sense. Yeah. I had a thought.
Yeah.
While you're talking, and I just got so absorbed by what you're saying. I need to think, but
and it disappeared. Yeah.
It
now
definitely disappeared.
Now you know why this happens to me all the time when we do live podcasts. Is because there's 100 things running through your head, and then you're like, oh, what was that other thing I was going to say? I lost it, and it'll come back later. But don't worry about it. So
probably
right. So we've got gnomes and dwarves who seem to be from the continents, and then do elves just show up on ships? Is that who comes next?
Yeah, so next we have I'm going to read this. This is a passage from the Blood of Elves, the book. This is a conversation that Ciri and Yarpen Zigrin are having, which of course I'm sure most of the people probably know who Ciri is and at least have heard of Yarpen Zigrin. I know he's a Gwent card. So this passage, this conversation says, elves, snorted Yarpen. They, to be accurate, happen to be strangers just as much as you humans, although they arrived in their white ships a good 1,000 years before you. Now they're competing with each other to offer us friendship. Suddenly we're all brothers. Now they're grinning and saying, we, kinsmen, we, the elder races. But before their arrows used to whistle past our ears when we... And this is a part where Siri interrupts, which if you read the books, Siri interrupts a lot. She says, so the first on Earth were dwarves. Which Yarpen responds, gnomes, to be honest, as far as this part of the world is concerned, because the world is unimaginably huge, Siri. So, again, we get that bit of a hint of, there's a greater world out there, but we are very focused in on the continent itself.
And this specific part of the continent. Yeah.
Yes. So this is whenever we would have the arrival of the specifically the Aeon Seed, which is the name of those first elves. And they arrive, like he said, on their white ships, and they land along the banks of the Pontar and the Yaruga rivers, which are very prominent features of the landscape. And this was an event called the Age of Migration. So they say that this happened 2,000 years before the humans arrived, but they don't specify exactly what they mean by the humans arrival, because we have two different circumstances, so it could mean 2,000 years before the conjunction, which would be when the first humans arrived through the conjunction, or if they're referring to the first landing, which is whenever the Nordlings would have started settling on the continent. So it's not exactly specific, when exactly this was, but that's a rough idea. They showed up. We know for sure they showed up after the dwarves were already there.
Yeah. So okay. So this is interesting because, and we're going to get to, in the second half of the show, we're going to get to more about the actual conjunction and the effects that it had on the world. But I'm sure if you're listening to the part that we're talking about right now, you're already, piecing it together that the humans were not naturally part of the world the same way the gnomes, the dwarves, and the elves are. That they are foreigners that were brought here through the conjunction of the spheres, or found their way through or somehow got here through the conjunction of the spheres, right? And yeah, that's interesting. 2,000 years before the humans, and did they? That's like, how do you date that? Like, where did they end up after the conjunction happened? And if they arrived by ship, how long were they on the planet before they made their way to this part of the continent? Like, it seems like there's some holes in some of the understanding there.
Yeah, this is kind of following the same idea, I think, of like our history. Like, we don't know, obviously with technology updating and things like that, new discoveries, we find out more and more about, what the past used to be like. But a lot of those things are kind of lost to us because they happened so long ago. Like, how can we know for sure? Right. When specifically things happened.
Right. Yeah. Like a good example would be that we know that all human life evolved out of Africa. We know that genetically we can trace everybody back to Africa. But what groups of people left Africa and went to Europe or Asia? And when did it happen? And were there multiple migrations? And like, how did this actually affect change on the evolutionary stage? Were there multiple migrations out of Africa where was there settlers that went to, say, somewhere like Spain first, and then another 400 years later, more humans showed up in Spain that had been traveling across the continent? Like, we don't know for sure. And I don't know that we will ever know for certain, but we get closer and closer as we are able to analyze genetic evidence and take a look at, fossil evidence and those kinds of things. But in this kind of world, you don't have science in the way we do now, right? So you just have storytelling and history books and the stories from the people who learned things from other wise people and passed it down. So yeah, so there's going to be holes like this about what's going on. But I think it's really interesting to note that the humans are foreigners. They're not natural to the world. They're like an invasive species. Would you agree?
emphasis on the invasive species, I think.
Yeah, very, very much so.
Oh yeah, definitely.
All right, so what are we going to be? We're going to take a little mid break here and talk about some other stuff, and then we'll be back after the mid break to discuss more. What are we going to be talking about after the mid break?
I think more specifically about the conjunction and like the actual conjunction event and some of the things like that result out of it. Because as we know, like based on what we've just said, that the world before was totally different than what we all know.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, let's go to the middle of the show. We're going to talk about some fun news that's coming up in very, very soon, and then we will be back to talk more about the conjunction.
Very well. Let us get this over with. Something has infested my vineyard.
Great. Let me go prepare my something oil then.
All right, welcome to the middle of the show. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and thank you for checking out this podcast. It is, this is probably how many Lorecasts do I do, Toasty? This is the 6th or 7th, I think. And
Fallout, Elder Scrolls, D&D, Cyberpunk, Mass Effect, Witcher.
The Witcher,
Am I missing?
Yeah, that's it so far. And who knows? Yeah, I might add some others. But
probably add some more. You're crazy.
Probably do some more. I'm crazy like that. But thank you for tuning in. I hope you guys are enjoying the information. There's so much to get to with The Witcher, so we're going to go over topic by topic and kind of build out things as we move forward. So I just want to make sure that you're aware that like this isn't the kind of thing that like we'll go 10 episodes and we covered everything. Like there's a lot to cover. We're going to get into the different beasts, the different races, historical events, all sorts of things that happen in the books that didn't happen in the games, things that happen in the games that are reflections of things that happen in the books, opinions about the TV series. And dude, I can't wait for season 2 to come out because we're going to get to talk about those episodes as we watch them and do episodes about like, oh my God, I can't believe this thing happened because it happened in the book this way and they did it perfect or whatever, because the series is so good. So we got a big announcement. What was the big announcement we got just recently over the last few days?
Oh yeah, it was pretty huge. So it seems like CD Projekt Red and Netflix kind of are teaming together to do a WitcherCon on July 9th. WitcherCon. That's insane.
This seems like the beginning of something that we're going to see on a regular yearly basis, because we do know that CD Projekt Red is committed to doing more Witcher games. On the Cyberpunk Lorecast, we talked about that they've now split their team up and they've reorganized their team, to make the Cyberpunk 2077 game better because they launched it too early and they know that, but also to focus on the Witcher series and bringing us new Witcher games, which is good to know. So what kinds of things can we expect?
So they have a few things here. Deep dives into the making of the Witcher games, live action series, anime film.
Oh yeah.
So that's interesting. And merchandise, including exclusive behind the scenes footage. So, I mean, that's cool. And the anime film, it sounds like we're getting more Witcher content, which, I mean, we can't argue with that. It's going to give us a lot to do for a while.
Absolutely. I love the tone of the world. This is when I was putting together the sound effects for the podcast, it got me like on this rabbit trail of just like watching clips and things, finding things I wanted to use. And I was just like, oh my God, this world. There's so many. Well, it's true. But then the world is just so good. The tone, the dark, interesting world, the way the music feels, even the TV show, like all of that stuff, like there's a feeling to it that is just, I don't know. It's so good. I hope they're able to use that in the animated series and at WitcherCon. Like, you go to these conventions and you see, gigantic posters and like statues and the things that they set up for the event, and people in costumes. Like, how many Geralts and Ciris are we going to have walking around? That's going to be awesome.
Yeah. And then, we're going to have interactive panels spotlighting the people who brought The Witcher to life in game and on screen. So that'll be interesting to kind of get those, because I'm sure that includes like some of the developers, voice actors and things.
Oh yeah.
Of course, like the actors,
right?
Henry Cavill.
What if we get Henry Cavill?
There.
What if we get the voice actors for like Geralt and Ciri in the games? Man,
I would love to see. I think it'd be funny. Obviously not a very important thing, but I think it'd be funny to have like a Geralt off between like the game voice of Geralt and Henry Cavill of like who can be the most gruff voice.
Who can be the most gruff voice and tell somebody to shove it? Yeah, like yes, that would be amazing.
And so featuring breaking news from the Netflix series and never before seen reveals from across the Witcher franchise. So that's exciting.
Maybe other stuff. What if we actually got like Gwent cards? Not just a Gwent game, but Gwent cards. Even if you couldn't play the game, because I know there's a lot of like computer mechanics in it, but just like a set of cards you could just kind of have, you know, like
that'd
card
be cool.
packs.
I mean that could be like a collectible type thing for the real like diehard fans, like, you know, like popping open, like, because obviously like you can play I feel like because we've recently had like this whole Pokemon cards craze, right?
Yeah,
like a lot of people busting over like older Pokemon card, finding like
making a lot of money off them on eBay and stuff.
And obviously Gwent would not have that same effect, but it'd be cool, like, you know, kind of have like a, you know, popping open a pack and like, oh man, I got Siri or something. You know?
Yeah.
Something really cool like that.
Yeah. Oh, I got to collect the whole Wild Hunt, you know, like, oh man, that'd be awesome. All right. So what other news do we have? We've got something else to show.
Yes. I don't know if you want to.
I don't know if I can play it. I've been thinking about it. It might get DMCA'd. Twitch is weird.
Probably.
Yeah. With the whole E3 thing, just to give somebody listeners some background, we are live at twitch.tv/robotsradio. This is where we do all of our live shows. Many of the nights during the week, starting at 9 p.m. Eastern. We are doing this show now on Monday nights. And E3 put out warnings about like co-streaming the events and how you might get DMCA'd for that stuff. So I'm a little bit more careful about playing this stuff live. Usually I'll put it up on the screen. But either way, it's a quick little clip with some visuals from the TV show, and specifically season 2 of the TV show, with some really interesting stuff kind of hidden in there. So what did you find, Toasty?
So there was a few little tidbits in there. It seems like what people were expecting as far as getting the kind of Blood of Elves storyline. Based on a few of the images there, it looks like, or it shows that it seems like Ciri is in Kaer Morhen doing her Witcher training.
Awesome.
Which would be super exciting. A few little like nods in there. Like there was a little bit of I did some kind of like snooping and stuff on the internet because I was curious as well. Looks like there's like an image of like 2 dangling ornaments, and it looks like it might be kind of a nod towards Lara Doran, who's like the originator of the Elder Blood. So
that would make sense. That would make sense as a reveal for this show with what they've done so far. Of
what we're gonna learn. I mean, we're out of the short stories, because like the first season was kind of like the first 2 books, the short stories by God, I always mess up his name, by Andrzej Sarkowski.
yeah, however you pronounce it. Polish names are hard.
So we're into the actual like story, like the main storyline involving Ciri, which Blood of Elves, which would be like the next book in line, involves her Witcher training and whatnot.
Yeah. If you're not aware, the first season was kind of a best of the short stories that lead up to the Blood of Elves, right?
Including, and then also some nice like kind of lore on like Yennefer and things that we didn't really know about before. Like they don't really talk about Yennefer much.
She just kind of shows up with this whole dilemma with the djinn in the first book, at the end of the book.
It goes from there, but we don't really learn like her origin story like we do with I guess Ciri. I mean, that's the whole point, getting her origin story. But a bit more. So this is where my crazy came out. This was me like I like woke up in the morning. I like took a shower and everything, and then like I was reading some articles because I get like news articles where they talk about, interesting things, and my news articles include, hey, you're a fan of The Witcher, so let's throw some Witcher news articles at you.
Oh, sure. Yeah, like a Google feed. I get that on my phone. Yeah.
Because I was trying. There's some runes in this trailer, this teaser thing. There's like 3 separate images of runes that we get to see. That of course they're runes, so we don't really understand them.
Pop up really quick, like 1 or 2 frames.
I had to put this on YouTube, and I put it at 0.25 speed in order to be able to pause it. It was way too fast. For me to grab.
It's like a frame. Yeah, it's so quick.
So I did a bit of research, and I couldn't find. I was looking at like Witcher languages and stuff, and like trying to find like the language system, and trying to see maybe it was that, and I couldn't find anything that matched up. And I was like, okay, well, maybe it's like something the show's doing, like a new thing, which technically speaking, it is. So I got this article on my phone, and it said Elven Runes. And previously I hadn't looked up Elven Runes, and I was like, maybe that's what I need to do. Yeah. So I go and I'm Googling Witcher Elven Runes, and I come across this interesting website called Redanian Intelligence, which the Redanians are like a kingdom Redania is a kingdom in The Witcher. Yeah. And so I'm like, okay, this is weird, but cool, I guess. And there's also apparently a Temerian intelligence website too. It's weird, but I come across this guy named David J. Peterson. He is a professional linguist, and he is kind of making the runic system for the Elder Speech for the Netflix series.
Oh yeah. You know what? I feel like I heard about this or saw him on something. Maybe it was one of the behind the scenes things that came out before the series started. It's been a while, but yes, it sounds familiar. He's making this. He's made this language system for the Elder Speech, and I found some translating like 2 pages where it translates the runes into like how they're literally spelled, how they're pronounced. And then like the Roman version, forget the Roman version. We don't need it. But so I don't know if we're going to be able to catch this at all. Here's my crazy ramblings. I'm over here decoding a cipher. You need to like make a wall of this stuff where you start like behind you and where people can see on camera behind you, like the crime board where you have like the string connecting each of the. That would be awesome.
I'll do that whenever I actually move and get my office space. I'll just have the back wall be just a crazy man's wall.
Oh my God. Like, and it just has every episode has more stuff up there about things that you figured out about like what's coming for the next season. And that would be awesome. We could post screenshots, like pictures of it up on the Twitter account. That would be great.
I'll get to work on that whenever that happens. We'll make that happen. But anyway, so I went through and I found some stuff, and I was able to kind of like double check on like Reddit and Twitter and stuff, people that were doing the same thing. So the first set of runes, they translate out to. I'm probably going to butcher these because this is Elder Speech. It's a bit more finesse than I got.
Sure.
So we
got your best.
We got. Ginvalee, Gynvaelee, which, so Ginvale is actually a word that we know in the lore. So we got the city known as Eid Ginvale, which is it literally translates to a shard of ice, and we actually get a little bit of this. I believe in the second book, which we talk about, we have a little bit of a Yennefer Geralt kind of story where they talk about this. They're in the city talking about, a shard of ice. So we have that translation. And then the second statement translates into Xiphon Ape.
Okay.
Sorry, AEP. It's a little bit of a weird one.
Ape? Yeah. Okay.
And this is the part where I don't know what this is. I like went looking, this does not translate anywhere.
So we don't have this word available for you to find, at least. If it's in the books, then it was something that isn't searchable yet.
Right. And then, well, I went I went on the wiki. There was like a whole list of like all these, like the words that we know.
Oh, wow. So people have already
that
pulled all
said,
that stuff out.
Actual sentences and stuff.
Oh, wow.
Not for this specifically, but in like the games and the books, everything that's said in the Elder Speech, then translated pretty much.
Wow. So this is something brand new. It's something we don't.
This is brand new.
We haven't seen spoken or written.
Yeah. And we have the third set of runes, which translates to Zolke Torana. And so this is another thing that we don't have, but there's possibly so before we have the two prominent things that are mentioned are the Tower of Swallow and the Tower of Gulls. And Tor, the Tower of Swallows is Tor Ziriel.
Okay.
So this might be some sort of like extension on tower, because we have Tor Anna. So like
the tower of something,
or tower of something, like it kind of an extension. So maybe mentioning like a tower or something. So obviously we didn't get a lot. We got the word ice.
Yeah, but that's fun. That's fun. And we might find that word in other things as more stuff gets leaked out.
I spent like an hour doing this stuff, just like first thing in the morning. Like I literally showered, didn't eat. I just was like, oh my god, I got to do this. But I did a little bit of browsing around the internet, and so it seems like the common, like, and I say common, it's not like a whole lot of people. The common thought on this is that they're giving us bits of Ithleen's prophecy, which talks about this is the prophecy that revolves around Ciri, the child of the elder blood, preventing the time of the frost. Ice Ginvale.
Ice shard. Okay. Yeah.
So,
and we know this season's going to be more about the elder blood. All of that
learning who Ciri is, kind of her identity. This is where she's probably going to learn this stuff.
Yeah.
Kind of hear the prophecy for the first time. So that seems like that's probably, and we don't have every word of the prophecy. We don't. So it makes sense that maybe if they wanted to really flesh it out, they're they're adding some stuff in there that we would have not known before. So, I mean, obviously, this is all speculation.
It's all investigative speculation, but
it's so cool.
Yeah,
it's so even one of these words translating to something we know is super cool.
Well, I think you've done an awesome job at this. It seems like we at least have a sense of maybe where we're going. And I would love to hear what our listeners think about this as well. Like, if you guys have any thoughts on this stuff, if you've done any digging of your own, please share it with us on the Witcher Lorecast Twitter account or on the Robots Radio Discord. All of our shows have channels on the Robots Radio Discord where people join all the time and chat about the games and the things that we're talking about. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. But yeah, that's some really cool stuff. Very, very cool, Toasty.
I kind of, once I saw that and I finally found something I could do, I was like, oh my god. But of course, I mean, that's what you do with these things, right? You got to pull them apart and find all the pieces that you could fit, fit together. And things.
I can't wait for your Charlie Day picture where you're standing in front of the board with all the string.
It's probably going to take a while, but we'll make it happen.
Yeah, that'll be awesome. Well, awesome. Well, before we go back to the rest of the show and talk more about the conjunction, I just want to say thank you so much for listening to the show. Thank you for being here. And if you want to help us out, if you enjoy what we're doing, we would love your help. The best thing you could possibly do right now is just tell your friends about it. If you have friends into The Witcher, if you've been enjoying the show, please just share it with a friend. The other thing you can do is if you have an Apple account, you don't even have to listen to the show on Apple Podcasts. It's available on Apple Podcasts. But if you just have an Apple account, you can leave a review and a rating on Apple Podcasts. And that helps us a ton because it lets other people know from your perspective if the show is worth listening to and what it's about, because we can say what we're about, but people tend to trust third-party reviews more than they do people talking about themselves, which clearly makes sense. So please go do that. Leave a rating and review. If you leave a 5-star review with some words attached, we will read that out on a future episode of the show in order to say thank you. So thanks for all your support, and thank you for being here to check out the new show. Again, we hope you enjoy it.
You smell of death and destiny, heroics and heartbreak.
It's onion.
Right, yeah.
It's onion. I had to include a game
That line
quote
gets me.
on the first one and a movie quote on the second one. And who knows, maybe
So
in the future
good.
I'll change these up a little bit. So let's talk more about the conjunction. What else? So we need to go into the details. What exactly is the conjunction and when did it happen?
All right. Well, so to set the mood, I got another little passage. These passages are great. This one is from a book you could find in the first Witcher game called. Guess what it's called? What do you think it's called?
It's called The Conjunction of the Blocks.
So close.
I'm wrong?
No, it's called The Conjunction of the Spheres. It's a book called The Conjunction of the Spheres. So this passage reads, a cataclysm which occurred 1,500 years ago, trapping in our dimension many unnatural creatures, including ghouls, graveyears, and vampires. These beasts have no ecological niches of their own and are merely relics of bygone times. According to Elven lore, humans arrived during the conjunction, their own world having been destroyed. These human ancestors learned how to harness the power of primordial chaos, and thus the first human wizards were born. Looking for a place in the world, humans took up arms against the elder races, who were unable to withstand the barbarians and ultimately surrendered. This is how humans came to rule the world.
Son of a bitch. These humans sound like they suck.
They really do.
They really do.
They really do.
The sense you get is that like they destroyed their own home world and then they had to come over here and start taking over somebody else's. Plus primordial chaos magic. Sounds really safe.
And of course they would learn how to harness it, right? And they were like, this is our. I mean, that's just how humans are. I think that's just how we are in general.
I mean, it's true to form. I mean, historically, we move into a new area, we dominate the area, we destroy all the big creatures that are threats, and then we run out of resources and we expand into another area. That's kind of what we do. So, yeah, it makes sense.
And this is probably a part where we put a bit of a disclaimer. So. It's not really going to come up in this episode much, but in the future episodes, this is a darker world. Like the world of the Witcher is darker. It's not pretty. And I think one of the biggest things, and of course we're not going to linger on it, but is a thing that's happens a lot is it's racism. Oh yeah. There's a lot of racism in The Witcher. So that's a thing we're gonna have to like deal with. And I don't think I think it's safe to say for both of us that racism is bad. We don't like it.
Yeah, I totally agree.
So we're probably going to try to dodge that a little bit.
It's a good thing to discuss. It's something that's worth. I mean, obviously you don't want to promote it, but it's definitely a topic that's worth discussing because it does map back to real world issues and real world problems and the destructive nature of racism and how it makes things difficult and hard for everybody. There's no real benefit to it at all. So, yeah, it'll be worth discussing for sure. But at the same time, there will be times where we have said our thing and we're just going to move on to the other details, even though it comes up again and again.
Yeah, but there's going to be stuff that comes up that's not good stuff. That's just the way it is. It's a dark universe. So.
Right.
But so what is the conjunction of the spheres?
Yeah, let's get to it. What is the conjunction of the spheres? Because we talked around it a lot. What is it?
Yeah. So it was this cataclysmic event. What a nice word. Where the separate worlds. So we're getting into this idea of a multiverse kind of thing, which is pretty popular nowadays. The separate worlds or spheres, imagine that, they collided together and kind of like merged and brought all these different things into the continent or the original, like the elder races and things. So this is where we get a lot of additions to this world that were not here before, because we had gnomes, we had dwarves, and we had elves. That was it, as far as we know.
Right. So it's almost like these two different dimensions kind of fused together on top of each other.
I think it was more than two. I think it was a
bunch.
A few.
Yeah.
It's a bunch. I mean, we definitely learn about that from Siri later on. She dimension hops.
Right. Yeah. So it's like these things all kind of like ended up lining up together, which then created a connection through which these creatures and other races traveled.
Came into this one world. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So what about the humans that arrived? What do we know about them?
So we have, and I think that we should definitely have kind of like more in-depth episodes about these other races and things.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot more. We
have the arrival of what we know as the first humans. So we got the I don't know how to Dauk or Dauk.
D-A-U-K.
I'm gonna say Dauk. It sounds cool. Dauk sounds cool. And Walsker people. So those were the first human races to show up, and they came in through the conjunction. Like it said, after their world had been destroyed, they destroyed their own world. And so they were like, well, here's a nice pit stop. Let's just hop off here. Like, our train stopped. Let's go here. This world's nicer. It's not destroyed.
Yeah, it seems fine. So we had humans. Do we have other races as well?
We have. So this is also, we have the Vran, the Werebubs.
Yes,
that's a great name. And halflings. Actually, halflings were not a part of the original.
Right.
And for, I think, at least for these, halflings, people know who halflings are. I think there's a pretty good idea about,
sure,
the general idea of halflings.
Yeah.
But just for a bit of elaboration on these other two races, the Vran and the Werebubs. So the Werebubs are kind of like dwarves, but a little bit animalistic, kind of.
Okay.
Like, They had like claws and like sharp teeth, and they were furry. And actually they
like Ewoks.
Not quite that furry for the sounds of it, but
right.
I suppose. And they actually, from the sounds of it, they integrated pretty well into the dwarven society, anyways. Like all the werebubs we see nowadays are in like dwarven society. And then the Vran are a species of lizard folk, lizard people, always cool.
Yeah, and they're secretly running the world, just like people think it's happening here. Okay, so we have those guys come in, and then what else do we know about the conjunction?
So we also know that this is where all the monsters show up. So, like, there's a lot of monsters, obviously. We know that. There's a ton. And they obviously specifically mention ghouls, graveyears, vampires. But we know from like the games and the books that there's like, way more griffins, kikimoras, dragons, Draco lizards. There's a whole mess of different monsters. Right. And they also showed up with the conjunction. So, you got the elder races, you got these new races that are showing up, you got a ton of monsters that also don't know what they're supposed to do yet, because I mean they're kind of like animals in a sense. Like they need to find, like I said, their ecological niches where they learn how to
survive? What do they eat in this new world? How do they survive? Some of them are highly intelligent. Some of them are very low intelligence. There's a wide variety of them. Some of them exist more on a magical plane. There's all sorts of interesting stuff going on.
And then to top it all off, we got the chaos, or probably a better magic. So this is that's a whole Sunday.
Yeah. So does magic in this world, is it synonymous with the chaos? And was it not here before the conjunction? Like, did the elves and dwarves not practice magic?
It makes it obviously they don't describe too much of that beforehand, but from the sounds of it, magic was not a thing until the conjunction of the spheres.
Interesting, because in a lot of literature and fantasy, especially the elves tend to be more magical, but in this fantasy, magic came into the world after the elves were already there, alongside humans and other creatures. And the humans are the ones who seem to be harnessing this chaos magic more than, say, the elves.
Yeah, so other elves do like later on, but it does make it pretty clear that like the humans were like the first to really tap into it. And to just kind of explain a little bit, I think a lot of these is like theory based, because there's no concrete. We just know the magic showed up in the connection of the spheres, but we already have this whole like multi-universe, multi-planar theory going on. And we happen to know from The Last Wish, we get a little bit of a detail about djinns because of like their involvement. And we know that there's 4 different types. And I think I'm not as much of an expert on D&D, maybe you can light me. I think this is also a thing that's kind of in D&D, where there's like 4 different types of genie, but they're all associated with a different plane, and they all have their own names. So like an Ifrit for fire. I can't remember exactly djinn. I think it's earth or air. So we know that there's like multi-plane, and it seems to be like a theory that like because of like the collision, like the chaos came in through those planes. Like we have the air, water, or like into it, because magic, a lot of the magic is drawn from the elements.
Got it.
So
interesting. Yeah. In D&D, just for the reference, there's 8 types instead of 4 of genie, and they have different names like Dao, Jinn, Ifrit, Mirids, Jan, Kayal, Korash, and then tasked genies is the last. For Witcher, if I remember correctly, Jinn I think is air, Ifrit is fire, Dao is earth, and Merit was water. Okay, I believe that's what we got. Obviously, that's not important. We'll get into a Jinn episode where we'll cover that in more confirmed detail. But yeah, right. Okay. But so that's kind of like the magic came from probably the actual impact of the different spheres coming together and kind of resulting in this like cataclysmic force. Yeah, I wonder if it's the energy that was released upon conjunction. It was like when you force multiple planes of existence to kind of come together and collide, it would be like, I mean, you drop a rock from a high enough distance and you're going to create, a release of energy, any distance, your energy is going to come out, but you do it at a severe distance, or moving at a very fast rate, and then you have an explosion, like a meteor hitting the earth, right? So it would make sense that something like the conjunction would have some sort of release of energy, and maybe this energy is the magic that they're able to, the chaos that erupted from the conjunction is the thing they're harnessing, is the energy itself. It kind of makes me, this is a bit beyond my level of knowledge, but kind of reminds me of like the aspect of like, I guess, molecular fusion,
Like whenever you fuse atoms together, and it results in this big, like,
Release of energy.
Force.
Yeah.
Or release of energy.
Yeah.
So, like, all of these, just imagine these are all different, like, atoms. Different spheres are all different atoms. They come together, fuse a little bit. Boom.
Right.
Magic chaos force.
Right. That makes sense. That's a really cool concept. I hadn't thought about that. I mean, a lot of this stuff I already knew from playing the games and reading the stories and things, but I hadn't considered it like that. That's a really neat perspective on that. So we're getting close to the end of the show. We've got to wrap it up in just a few minutes. Is there anything else that we need to cover before we head out?
So, this is kind of, there's this whole, like, learning period after the conjunction, kind of, learning how to deal with all these new things. I mean, a bunch of new races are thrown in. These older races are figuring out how to deal with the newer ones, and then monsters and magic. So they don't go into much detail, but I imagine there was a long period of like what the heck are we supposed to do here kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it was in this time period where we start seeing a bit more. It sounds like, and I'm basing a little bit off of this, like the theory that you and Lainey have talked about in the Fallout Lorecast,
right? Of,
evolving beyond your basic needs, getting into culture and things. I can't remember exactly the name for that, unfortunately, but
Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, that's the thing I was talking about.
So the concept that as an individual, you have to take care of the bottom step of the pyramid before you can move to the higher steps. And the bottom step is just basic existence and sustenance. So you have to take care of food and shelter. And then once you take care of that kind of stuff, you're able to exist. Then you need to take care of like interpersonal things, like having personal connections and family. And only until you take care of all these fundamental things can you get to these higher things, like thinking about like, what are morals and what is the right thing to do? What does good mean? What does evil mean? Like all of these other concepts. Yeah.
Yeah. So during this time period, we can see that, like, based on the evidence that we have, it seems like they kind of are starting to get a hold of. They do get a hold of things, because we see the emergence of like goddess worship, specifically the goddess Melitala, or she's like the goddess of like fertility and agriculture. Like a farming goddess, like I believe Demeter or something in like Greek mythology, kind of.
Oh yeah.
On the sounds of it.
Yeah.
And then we also see development of like written language, Elven Runes, Dwarven ideograms. So they're obviously meeting those needs and exceeding those needs and coming up with other things. So there must have been like they finally got a hold of it, probably after a little bit. And this is kind of what we have until we get to the event known as the First Landing, when the Nordlings arrive on the Pontar Delta. And Nordlings are human, a type of human. So
So just as these older races are getting a handle on things, they're starting to worship their gods. They're starting to write things. They're starting to deal with all the new crap in the world. The humans show up on their shores. That seems to be the story here.
Different humans that were than the ones that were already there.
Yeah.
Brand new humans.
A specific group called the Nordlings. That's interesting. And then things are never quite the same. So, man, that's the beginning of where we see things now, where humans are now in charge of most things, are the predominant culture, and are, of course, at war with each other and doing all sorts of terrible stuff to the other races. So, yeah, that's the beginning of that. Where do you think we're going to go with this on our next episode?
So, I was going to do a whole thing on the First Landing, and I was like thinking into it, and the First Landing is not as explained as I was hoping it was. So I think what I want to do is go into a bit more of the timeline that leads up to the creation of the first Witcher.
Yeah.
Or Witchers.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
This is what we're here for, right?
Yeah.
It's the Witcher.
Right.
So I think getting an idea and a lot of important events that we'll go into or whatever are going to happen this time. The formation of the Brotherhood of Sorcerers, or the Conclave of Sorcerers, however. So that's a big thing. So we're going to go into some of these important events that happen that lead up to the development of the first Witcher.
Right. The different kingdoms, the empires, oh man. Okay, seems like magic, the use of magic, all that stuff. Yeah, it seems like some really, really cool stuff. Well, awesome. This has been a really fun first episode. Thanks for putting this all together, and I hope our listeners have enjoyed the show. Please let us know. Let us know what you think, and let us know what questions you have about this world and what things that we should cover in the future. We'd love to find out your thoughts and things. And again, you can send us a tweet at the Witcher Lorecast. I think it's just at Witcher Lorecast, right? On Twitter or on the Robots Radio Discord. There's a link in the show notes, or you could just search Robots Radio Discord. It comes right up when you Google it. But thanks for listening again. Toasty, do you have anything going on that you want to shout out? Any ways people should get a hold of you?
I mean, I'm on the Discord, and I'm a brand new host. I would love to talk to people about The Witcher. Because I'm sure we have a lot of people in our community that probably love The Witcher.
Absolutely,
I imagine that there's a ton of people in there. So let's start talking about The Witcher. We'll start talking about things. I am in the market for ideas on a mid break. That's what we call it, right? A mid break idea, because
something fun to include
today.
Yeah, something fun that we could regularly include. Like on the Mass Effect Lorecast, we had people show us their shepherds. And in The Witcher, you don't design your own character, so it's not like you could show us your Geralt or something. They're all going to look the same.
There's like sort of builds and things, but it's not quite as
their faces, I think, are going to be the same, basically. So,
I'm in the market for ideas. I would love to hear anyone's ideas for cool things that we could do. And you can follow me on Twitter personally at SoThanatoasted. I think it's _Thanatoasted on Twitter. All caps. I have a Pepe Toast as my icon if you get confused. And then follow the Witcher Lorecast. It's just at Witcher Lorecast on Twitter.
Yep.
Follow us. Follow my social media journey as I figure out how to social media.
It's not that hard. And you can find me on Twitter at robots_radio. That's it's my account, but it's also kind of the main account for the network of shows. And if you're interested in any of these other Lorecasts or any of the other shows on the network at all, we've got tons of shows on video games and movies and all sorts of other stuff. So go to robotsradio.net. You can check out all that stuff. Lots of shows. And even we even have a Robots Radio Rocket Club, which is like a mentorship group of people launching their own podcasts. And I work with them to get their own podcast launched, talk about the technology they need, how to create a show, how to market a show, all of that kind of stuff. So lots of cool stuff on robotsradio.net and, of course, on our Discord channel. So we'd love to talk with you guys. So we'll see you around. And until next week, we'll be back at the same time, 9 p.m. Eastern on Robots Radio. Is Robots Radio's Twitch channel, twitch.tv/robots. So many things to talk about. Twitch.tv/Robots Radio. We'll see you again next week here. Until then, stay safe. See you guys later. Bye. Thanks for tuning in to the Witcher Lorecast. We'd love to hear about your experiences with the games and the books and the TV series and all your thoughts on everything. Please check out the Robots Radio Discord and follow us on Twitter at Witcher Lorecast.
You've been listening to a Robots Radio podcast. Smart shows for interesting people. Check out all the shows at robotsradio.net.